The Night the Witch Returned. True story of the midnight market, there's a legend whispered in hushed tones across the hills of Kwa Machawi, a small village surrounded by dense, ancient forests. The villagers speak of a cursed market that appears only under the dark canopy of a new moon. They call it Soko la Usiku, the midnight market. It's said to be a gathering place for witches, a hub where they trade human souls for power, secrets, and dark treasures. Most villagers avoid the forest paths at night. But if you ever hear the distant hum of voices and see glowing lanterns through the trees, the elders warn, turn around and run. Do not look back. Do not step closer. But like all good warnings, it came with a price for disobedience. This is the story of what happened to Kamau, a young man who ignored those warnings and lived to tell the tale. Kamau was an orphan, a dreamer, and a skeptic. Raised by his grandmother, he'd heard the stories of the midnight market many times, but he dismissed them as mere superstition. He often joked with his friends about the supposed witches, calling them ghost merchants, and laughing off the fear that gripped his elders. But what Kamau didn't know was that his curiosity would lead him to uncover a truth far more terrifying than any tale. One fateful evening, the village plunged into darkness. The new moon hung invisibly in the sky, and the air was unnaturally still. Kamau had stayed late at the river, fishing to provide for himself. As he packed up to leave, he noticed something odd. A soft, golden glow flickering through the trees, accompanied by the faint sound of drums and whispered voices. "It's just a wedding or a celebration in another village," he told himself. But as he stepped closer, the air turned cold, and the whispers grew louder, almost beckoning him. Curiosity burned in his chest. Against all logic, against the warnings that had been drilled into him since childhood, Kamau decided to investigate. The path through the forest was eerily silent. No crickets chirped, no owls hooted. The trees loomed like shadowy sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out as if to pull him back. Kamau's heart pounded as he approached the light. Finally, he stepped into a clearing, and his breath caught in his throat. There it was, Soko la Usiku. The market was like nothing Kamau had ever seen. Dozens of stalls, draped in tattered black cloth, lined the clearing. Lanterns made of human skulls hung from crooked poles, casting an unnatural glow. Over the scene, the merchants were not human. Some had sunken faces with hollow eyes, while others appeared as shadowy figures that flickered like candle flames. A few had grotesque animal features, elongated snouts, sharp claws, or twisted horns. And yet, they moved with an unnatural grace, speaking in hushed, raspy tones. Kamau froze, every fiber of his being screaming at him to run. But before he could turn, a figure appeared before him. She was tall and cloaked in a dark robe, her face obscured by a veil. Her voice was smooth, almost melodic. "Welcome, traveler," she said. "You've wandered far. Are you here to trade?" I was just..." Kamau stammered, his voice trembling. The woman tilted her head, and though he couldn't see her eyes, he felt her gaze pierce through him. "No one comes here by accident. Perhaps you've brought something valuable?" Kamau shook his head, backing away. "I didn't mean to. I'll just go." But as he turned, he realized the path. Behind him had vanished. The trees now formed an impenetrable wall, trapping him within the market. Desperate, Kamau began to weave through the stalls, looking for an escape. The merchants watched him with silent interest, their twisted faces unreadable. He passed a stall where jars of glowing blue light lined the shelves. One of the merchants, a hunched figure with bird-like talons, grinned at him. "Souls," it croaked. "Care to trade yours for wealth or power?" Kamau shook his head and hurried on. He passed another stall where a merchant's wares seemed to shimmer and shift. showing visions of loved ones lost. The merchant, a woman with eyes as black as coal, whispered, "I can bring them back. All it takes is a piece of your shadow." Panic set in as Kamau realized the market wasn't just a gathering of witches. It was a place of dark bargains, where the price was always more than it seemed. At the center of the market stood a massive tree, its gnarled roots forming a natural stage. Beneath it, a group of witches huddled around a cauldron, chanting in a language Kamau couldn't understand. The air around them shimmered with dark energy. As Kamau edged closer, he saw a young girl standing before the witches. She looked terrified, her hands bound with rope. One of the witches raised a knife, and Kamau realized with horror that they were about to offer her as a sacrifice. Something inside him snapped. Ignoring his fear, he grabbed a heavy stick from the ground and charged forward, shouting, "Let her go!" The witches turned, their faces twisting into monstrous visages. One of them hissed, "You dare interrupt the ritual?" Kamau swung the stick wildly, breaking the circle. The witches screamed as the dark energy around them began to unravel. Grabbing the girl, Kamau ran, his heart pounding as the market erupted into chaos. The path reappeared before him, and Kamau didn't stop until he and the girl were far from the clearing. When they finally emerged from the forest, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the village. The girl, too shaken to speak, clung to Kamau as they stumbled into the safety of the village. Later, Kamau learned that the girl had been missing for 3 days, taken from her home by an unknown force. The elders, hearing his story, warned him never to speak of what he'd seen. "The witches will not forget," they said. "You disrupted their trade. They will come for you." To this day, Kamau keeps a charm of protection around his neck, and he never ventures into the forest at night. He knows the midnight market is real, and though he survived, he's haunted by the memory of those witches' faces and the bargains they offered. And sometimes, on nights when the moon is new and the village falls silent, Kamau swears he can hear the distant hum of voices and see the flicker of golden light through the trees. What happens if you accidentally walk into the midnight market? Kamau's story is a warning. You might escape, but you'll never truly be free.